Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. In today's video we are going to be discussing my last head gasket job on my 1995 Toyota Land Cruiser FZJ80 on the 1FZ-FE inline 6 engine. We will discuss labor, parts, costs, and just an overall logistic pricing of everything that you need to know if you're going to be tackling this job. Let's start out with some history on this 95 Land Cruiser. The head gasket was done by the previous owner on December 14, 2019, with the vehicle having 211,881 miles. I purchased this vehicle on November 3rd, 2021, with it having 225,869 miles. The head gasket blew on 3/16/2022 at 228,391. The head gasket lasted 16,510 miles throughout this whole process, which is roughly 823 days. With my ownership, it lasted only 2,522 miles since I owned it. The receipts show that the past owner paid $550 for the head gasket to be overhauled. During my teardown of the head gasket, I found out that there was a lot of missing bolt on the intake side. A lot of gaskets were reused with RTV, and this was just a poorly done job by the past mechanic. So they definitely did this in the cheapest way, and it does look like they did use a Toyota OEM head gasket. That is one thing that they did do right, but for the most part, looks like a lot of the parts were reused, including some of the gasket that should have been replaced. Two major costs of head gasket overhaul is the cost of parts and cost of labor. In this case here, the labor was mostly free because I did this myself. The only service I paid for was to get my cylinder head resurfaced and check and all that stuff, and then we'll go ahead and go over parts here in a bit. So when you're doing this job, you want to factor in who's going to do this job for you. Are you mechanically inclined enough to do this job? Do you have the proper tools to do this job? If you have all of that skills and the knowledge to read online, follow the factory service manual book, you're most likely able to do this job yourself. In my case, this was my second time doing a head gasket job. The first time I did it was last year when I did it on the Tacoma 3RZ, which is a four-cylinder. So you just have to ask yourself and see if you can do this yourself. If you can't do it yourself, definitely take it to a mechanic because this is a very in-depth job. There's lots of things that needs to go in place, in particular orders, torque specs must be followed in this case. So I don't recommend this if you're completely noob, but if you have past experience with mechanic, turning wrenches, and just the knowledge and overall, this is something you can definitely do. Now, if you're looking to hire somebody to do this job for you, I don't know what the shop rates are going for, but I can say that for sure this job is definitely gonna take at least over 8 hours to do it properly. So when you factor 8 hours times $100, which is the average shop price, you're looking at $800 or more just in labor alone. So keep that into mind when you're doing this project labor. Let's discuss what we replaced in this head gasket overhaul. These are what I replaced in my project, and you can decide if you want to replace them in your project or not, but I highly recommend if you haven't done a full overhaul or you haven't done a full baseline on your engine, you might as well replace these while you're at it. We did the head gasket, all the intake and the miscellaneous gasket replaced, spark plugs were replaced. Didn't change the spark plug wires because I already did that prior to this project. Oil filter change, coolant change, we got new radiator hoses, all the miscellaneous coolant hoses were all changed as well. New belts for the alternator, power steering, new fuel filter, new water pump, thermostat, all went with the ASIN. And then we also went ahead and did a timing chain overhaul, full timing chain overhaul, so new sprocket, new chain, new cam chain tensioner. This is something that I will recommend you do if you don't have any record of when your timing chain was done, because this is a great time to do it while you're in there that deep. During this time here, I also went ahead and replaced my tie rod ends because this was a good time to do it anyways, because you do have to drop your oil pan. So if you are gonna do your oil pan, you're gonna drop it down, it's good to just remove your tie rods and your drag links because it makes it more easier. We also reseal the oil pan. The oil pan has to come out because we did a timing chain. There's no way out. And then we also went ahead and replaced the Denso alternator because the alternator that I had was burnt out. During this time, I went ahead and put a new Old Man Emu steering dampener. All the oil pump, the front main seals, they were all replaced. And then I also went ahead and replaced the gasket for the oil cooler, which I highly recommend you guys do, and clean that out once you open it. I also went ahead and deleted the EGR on this system, and also there's a lot of miscellaneous parts that also gets replaced during this whole process that I'm not gonna name, because once you're in there you'll know, like all the gasket, the distributor O-ring, the oil cinder pressure gasket. You want to replace all the gasket that's there, whether they are the metal ones or plastic. Anything that has a gasket, you want to replace it. Nothing is reusable. Time for the fun part. How much did this cost? How much did service cost? So let's get it right into it. The first one we have here is the cylinder head resurface. That costs $190. What they did for this right here was degrease it, clean it, pressure check, vacuum test it, and then they resurfaced the head. They reserve it to 9,000 of an inch, which is pretty not bad, but it's within tolerance. So that was $190. They also found out that the exhaust valves were leaking just a little bit. So when I got the head back, I took out all the valves, cleaned it, wire brushed it, and then for all the exhaust valve, I went back and re-lapped them. So that was my first time lapping them, and I re-lapped them, and I only did the exhaust valve. So the cylinder head, the expense for that was $190. Machine shops rates will vary depending on your location, so you would have to call around and see what they're gonna charge. I highly recommend you guys call around before you start doing it, just to get an idea of what to expect and go from there. Parts. Where did I get my parts? The tie rods were ordered through Marlin Crawler. The rest of the parts were mostly ordered through Parts Q, Rock Auto. Some parts were through Amazon, and then some parts through Nick George Toyota Parts Online. One of our first invoice here was from Parts Q, and keep in mind that I did make a separate video showing off all these parts, so make sure if you guys want to get a visual of just the parts alone, watch my other video. I'll put that in the link description. This will just be a quick flyby. So this right here contained all the head gaskets, miscellaneous coolant hoses, some grommets, some gaskets, and here and there. And this one ran about $272. This is with shipping, and all this stuff came from, I bet, the Middle East, I believe, but again, these are all OEM Toyota parts. Our next list right here is the timing chain overhaul, and I ordered this separately because at first I didn't know if I wanted to replace this, and once I cracked the timing chain cover, I was like, man, let's just go ahead and replace it. So try to order all this on one order to save yourself in some shipping. Shipping was $37 for this one. Wasn't too bad, but this right here contains all the timing chain, all the assembling, the sprocket. The only thing that this one didn't include was they weren't able to fulfill order number 7, which was one of the O-ring, and that was the big O-ring that goes inside of the timing cover. I went ahead and ordered that through McGeorge Toyota, and that O-ring cost like less than $2. All these small O-rings and small gaskets and stuff like that, that's like a couple bucks only. When you're ordering this stuff, make sure to order like 2 or 3 on hand just for backup, because they are so small, they cost so less that it's good to order just more than one just for backup. So that's what I did in this case. Most of those O-rings, I ordered 2 of each. After ordering my big purchase, I found out I was missing some gaskets and some other hoses, so I went ahead and ordered more parts. And like I said, this takes a toll on your shipping charges, so make sure you get all the parts that you need and try to make it into one order. So these were the parts. And as I mentioned earlier, I did make a separate video showing all the parts, so if you guys need a visual illustration of what the parts are with their corresponding part number, check out my other 2 videos where I opened the head gasket kit and also the timing chain kit. So now we have all that done. Let's go through a quick wrap of what I have and what our total was for this whole head gasket job. So again, we had the head surface, the machine, $190. We have the ARP head stud, $178. And then we have coolant hoses, thermostat, water pump was $70. Toyota belts was $18 off of eBay. Those are OEM Toyota ones. Fuel filter was $35. I also did get the width in EGR plates. Those ran $59. New spark plug, and I also ordered the crank pulley tool holder. I ordered off of that. I ordered that off of a member on I Hate Mud forum, and that was $70. Totally worth it for torquing your crank bolt back in. And then we also got the alternator. I ordered that through Rock Auto. It was $175. They do have a $25 cord charge, but I ended up not sending my old one because it was just too much of a hassle. We didn't get a radiator this time. I was gonna replace the radiator, but I ended up not getting it because AutoZone couldn't fulfill it. And then the Denso one on Amazon was like $300, and I just decided not to spend the money for the meanwhile. And then we also got to factor in miscellaneous things like small bits and pieces, like all the oil fluid, the coolant, all that stuff ran over about $100 that I didn't really document too much, but those are all the little bits and pieces that doesn't get documented. So at the end of this day, our total was $1751 on paper, but I'm gonna estimate that we spent maybe $1,800 just in parts alone. So right now you're looking about $1,800 just for a head gasket overhaul. And again, this is a very detailed one. You can probably do it cheaper if you go with like third-party brands, but I highly don't recommend that. I think that if you're gonna spend the money into a head gasket job, and if this is a truck or a car that you love and you plan to keep for 5+10 years, spend the extra money, get OEM parts, whether that's a Toyota or whatever vehicle you're driving. Spend the extra money and do it right, and do it right the first time, because you don't want to go back and redo this job and knowing that you bought some cheap parts that failed down the line. So $1,800 isn't bad, because like I say, we saved a lot of money on the labor, because if I would have taken this to a shop, I'm pretty sure my labor would have been over $1,000 plus on top of the product. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys got any questions, let me know in the comment section below, and also check out the playlist of the head gasket overhaul, because I documented the project when I was doing. So if you guys got any questions, just go watch those vlogs and you guys can get some information and some details there. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.